Welcome to a world in chaos, a deep dive into the turmoil shaking our planet right now. If you're watching from the US or Canada, things feel off, wars raging overseas, economies teetering on the edge, and Mother Nature throwing curveballs like never before. But how did we get here, and what does it mean for everyday folks like you and me? Buckle up, because we're about to unpack the madness step by step. Let's start with the big picture. The world in 2025 is a powder keg. Geopolitical tensions are at an all-time high. Remember the Russia-Ukraine conflict that kicked off back in 2022? It's still grinding on, with no end in sight. Russian forces have dug in deep in eastern Ukraine, while NATO's pumping billions in aid to Kyiv. Just last month, reports surfaced of escalated drone strikes hitting civilian areas, leaving thousands displaced. And it's not just Europe. Tensions in the Middle East are boiling over again. The Israel-Hamas war has morphed into a broader regional firestorm, pulling in Iran and its proxies. US troops are still stationed in Syria and Iraq, dodging rocket attacks from militias. It's like the Cold War never ended. It's just gone hot in spots we least expected. But chaos isn't just about bombs and borders. Let's talk climate. 2025 has been a brutal year for weather disasters. In the US alone, we've seen record-breaking hurricanes slamming the Gulf Coast. Hurricane Zeta in September flooded New Orleans worse than Katrina. Up in Canada, wildfires ravaged British Columbia, forcing evacuations and choking the air across the border into Washington state. Scientists warn we're past the tipping point. Greenland's ice sheet is melting faster than predicted, raising sea levels and threatening coastal cities like Miami and Vancouver. And don't get me started on the heat waves. Europe baked at over 110 degrees Fahrenheit this summer, while California's facing another mega drought. These aren't isolated events. They're symptoms of a planet in revolt against decades of pollution and inaction. Economically, it's a roller coaster. Inflation's cooled a bit, but supply chain snarls from the pandemic linger. Remember those empty shelves in 2021? Well, they're back. Thanks to shipping disruptions in the Red Sea from Houthi attacks, gas prices are hovering around $4 a gallon in the Midwest, and groceries? Forget it, families are stretching budgets thin. The stock market's volatile, with tech giants like Apple and Tesla swinging wildly on AI hype and trade wars with China. Unemployment's low, but wages aren't keeping up, leaving millennials and Gen Z buried in student debt and housing costs that rival the 2008 crash. Pandemics? COVID-19 taught us a lesson we haven't learned. New variants keep popping up, and now there's talk of bird flu jumping to humans. Health experts are bracing for the next big one, with global travel making containment a nightmare. Now, let's zoom in on the geopolitical side of this chaos. The world feels like it's on a knife's edge, with major conflicts dragging on and threatening to pull in more players. If you're in the US or Canada, these wars might seem far away, but they're hitting your wallet through higher energy prices and supply disruptions. And they could escalate in ways that affect global security. The Russia-Ukraine war, now in its fourth year as of late 2025, shows no signs of wrapping up. Russian forces have made slow but steady gains this year, capturing thousands of square kilometers in the east, though at a huge cost. Peace talks have been ongoing, with US involvement pushing for deals that include security guarantees for Ukraine. But Putin has reaffirmed his maximalist goals: full control over claimed territories and no strong NATO ties for Kyiv. Recent reports show negotiations stalling over territorial issues, with Russia rejecting compromises that don't meet its demands. Drone strikes and artillery continue, displacing more civilians and straining Europe's energy supplies. For North Americans, this means volatile oil prices and ongoing aid debates in Congress. Over in the Middle East, the Israel-Gaza situation remains tense, even under a fragile ceasefire signed earlier this year. The truce, brokered with heavy US input, has held broadly since October, allowing some hostage releases and aid flows. But violations persist. Israeli strikes have killed hundreds since the deal, often targeting alleged militants, while Hamas faces pressure to disarm as part of Phase 2 talks. Heavy rains recently flooded displacement camps, worsening the humanitarian crisis with deaths from hypothermia and collapses. Mediators from Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey are pushing for the next phase, full Israeli withdrawal, Hamas stepping down, and an international force stepping in. Yet distrust runs deep, and sporadic violence keeps the region on edge. This instability disrupts shipping routes, adding to global inflation pressures felt in US gas pumps and Canadian imports. These aren't isolated fights. Geopolitical risks topped global reports in 2025, with armed conflicts ranking as the biggest immediate threat. From Sudan to Myanmar, wars are displacing millions and fueling migration pressures that could reach North American borders. Add in US-China trade tensions and rising cyber threats, and it's clear, fragmentation is the new normal. Leaders warn of a polycrisis, where conflicts intersect with economic and climate woes. For folks back home, this means higher defense spending, potential draft talks if things escalate, and a world where alliances like NATO are tested daily. But understanding these hotspots helps us see why diplomacy matters and why ignoring them could bring the chaos closer. Now, let's zoom in on the geopolitical side of this chaos. The world feels like it's on a knife's edge, with major conflicts dragging on and threatening to pull in more players. If you're in the US or Canada, these wars might seem far away, but they're hitting your wallet through higher energy prices and supply disruptions, and they could escalate in ways that affect global security. The Russia-Ukraine war, now in its fourth year as of late 2025, shows no signs of wrapping up. Russian forces have made slow but steady gains this year, capturing thousands of square kilometers in the east, though at a huge cost. Peace talks have been ongoing, with US involvement pushing for deals that include security guarantees for Ukraine. But Putin has reaffirmed his maximalist goals: full control over claimed territories and no strong NATO ties for Kyiv. Recent reports show negotiations stalling over territorial issues, with Russia rejecting compromises that don't meet its demands. Drone strikes and artillery continue, displacing more civilians and straining Europe's energy supplies. For North Americans, this means volatile oil prices and ongoing aid debates in Congress. Over in the Middle East, the Israel-Gaza situation remains tense, even under a fragile ceasefire signed earlier this year. The truce, brokered with heavy US input, has held broadly since October, allowing some hostage releases and aid flows. But violations persist. Israeli strikes have killed hundreds since the deal, often targeting alleged militants, while Hamas faces pressure to disarm as part of Phase 2 talks. Heavy rains recently flooded displacement camps, worsening the humanitarian crisis with deaths from hypothermia and collapses. Mediators from Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey are pushing for the next phase, full Israeli withdrawal, Hamas stepping down, and an international force stepping in. Yet distrust runs deep, and sporadic violence keeps the region on edge. This instability disrupts shipping routes, adding to global inflation pressures felt in US gas pumps and Canadian imports. These aren't isolated fights. Geopolitical risks topped global reports in 2025, with armed conflicts ranking as the biggest immediate threat. From Sudan to Myanmar, wars are displacing millions and fueling migration pressures that could reach North American borders. Add in US-China trade tensions and rising cyber threats, and it's clear, fragmentation is the new normal. Leaders warn of a polycrisis, where conflicts intersect with economic and climate woes. For folks back home, this means higher defense spending, potential draft talks if things escalate, and a world where alliances like NATO are tested daily. But understanding these hotspots helps us see why diplomacy matters and why ignoring them could bring the chaos closer. Let's shift gears to the environmental side of this chaos. Climate change isn't some distant threat anymore, it's hitting hard right here in North America. 2025 has been one of the roughest years on record for extreme weather, with disasters costing billions and disrupting millions of lives. If you're in the US or Canada, you've probably felt it firsthand: smoky skies, flash floods, or scorching heat that just won't quit. The year kicked off with a bang, or rather a blaze. In January, massive wildfires tore through the greater Los Angeles area, becoming the costliest natural disaster of the first half of 2025. These fires destroyed thousands of buildings, racked up over $60 billion in damages, and were made far more intense by climate-driven dry conditions and high winds. Scientists say human-caused warming made those fire weather conditions about 35% more likely. Smoke choked the air across California, and the fallout lingered for months. Then came the floods. The US saw a record number of flash flood events this year, with deadly ones in July devastating central Texas. Torrential rains turned rivers into monsters, claiming over 130 lives in the hill country, one of the worst inland flooding disasters in history. Earlier, severe storms hammered the Midwest and South, causing widespread river flooding. Up north in Canada, heavy rains and melting snow contributed to evacuations and property damage. Wildfires didn't stop at the border. Canada endured its second worst fire season ever, with over 6,000 blazes, burning nearly 9 million hectares, mostly in provinces like Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Alberta, and British Columbia. Smoke from these fires blanketed much of the country and drifted south, turning skies hazy from the Midwest to the Northeast. Thousands were evacuated, and air quality alerts became routine in cities like Toronto and Minneapolis. Heat waves piled on the misery. Record highs baked parts of the US and Canada, worsening droughts in the Southwest and straining power grids. While no major hurricanes slammed the US mainland this season, a rare break, the overall pattern of extremes fits what experts have warned about: warmer oceans and atmosphere loading the dice for bigger storms, longer fire seasons, and unpredictable rains. These events aren't random. Carbon pollution is supercharging them, making heat waves hotter, fires fiercer, and rains heavier when they come. For everyday Americans and Canadians, it means higher insurance rates, disrupted travel, health risks from smoke and heat, and threats to food supplies from drought-stressed farms. The interconnected hits keep coming. Wildfires release more carbon, worsening warming. Floods contaminate water sources. But awareness is growing. We'll talk adaptation and solutions soon. First, let's look at how the economy's getting hammered. We've talked wars and weather, but let's not forget the economy. It's been a wild ride in 2025. And if you're in the US or Canada, you've felt the bumps directly. Growth has slowed, inflation's sticky, and trade wars have thrown everything off balance. Things looked resilient early on, but escalating tariffs and lingering supply issues turned optimism into caution by year's end. The big story? Trade wars. President Trump's aggressive tariffs on China, Mexico, and even Canada sparked retaliatory moves and massive market volatility. A full-blown stock market crash hit mid-year, wiping out trillions as fears of recession spiked. Investors panicked over disrupted supply chains and higher costs passing through to consumers. Tech stocks, riding high on AI hype earlier, took huge hits when tariff threats targeted chips and electronics. By late 2025, markets have partially recovered on hopes of deals, but uncertainty lingers. Analysts warn of subdued growth into next year. Inflation's another headache. It cooled from pandemic peaks but stayed persistent, hovering around 2.75-3 in the US by December. Services prices accelerated, and core measures remained elevated. In Canada, food prices are set to rise 3-5 again, pushing average family grocery bills up hundreds of dollars. Gas prices? Volatile all year, averaging over $3 a gallon in parts of the US and fluctuating wildly in Canada due to global tensions. Supply disruptions played a role too. Houthi attacks in the Red Sea forced ships to reroute around Africa, jacking up shipping costs and delaying goods. Even with some pauses tied to ceasefires, freight rates stayed high, feeding into everything from electronics to clothing. Unemployment's been low overall, but cracks are showing, rising slightly in North America, especially for recent grads. Wages aren't keeping pace with costs, squeezing middle-class families. Housing affordability? Still a nightmare, with high rates and shortages keeping prices elevated. Stock markets ended mixed. AI-driven tech giants like Nvidia and Microsoft powered gains early, but broader indexes struggled amid trade fears. For everyday folks, this means tighter budgets, higher bills for heat, food, and fuel during winter. Retirement accounts swung wildly, and small businesses grappled with unpredictable costs. Global forecasts point to slower growth ahead, with risks from ongoing conflicts and policy shifts. It's interconnected chaos. Wars disrupt energy, climate hits crops, trade fights raise prices. But economies adapt. AI investments are creating jobs, and rate cuts have provided some relief. Still, 2025 showed how fragile stability is. Next, we'll explore emerging threats like pandemics and cyber risks that could tip the scales further. Beyond wars, weather, and economic woes, two shadow threats loom large in 2025: potential pandemics and relentless cyber attacks. These aren't sci-fi scenarios, they're real risks hitting headlines and disrupting lives right now. For folks in the US and Canada, they're especially worrying because our interconnected world means a virus overseas or a hack halfway around the globe can quickly become a local crisis. Let's start with health threats. COVID-19 feels like ancient history to some, but it reminded us how fast a new bug can spread. In 2025, the big watchlist item is H5N1 bird flu. This strain has been ripping through birds, poultry, and even dairy cows worldwide, with outbreaks in the US affecting herds in multiple states. Human cases have popped up too, over 70 confirmed in the US since early 2024, mostly mild from direct animal contact, like farm workers. Tragically, there was one severe case and a death in Louisiana earlier this year. Globally, cases are sporadic, often tied to poultry exposure in places like Cambodia and Asia, but no sustained human-to-human spread yet. Still, experts are on edge. The virus is evolving, spilling over to mammals more often, and health agencies like CDC and WHO are stockpiling vaccines and monitoring closely. A mutation allowing easy person-to-person transmission could spark the next pandemic. Other worries include mpox outbreaks in Africa, dengue surging in warmer climates, and cholera hitting hard in multiple countries. Measles is resurging too, thanks to dropping vaccination rates. Outbreaks in the US and Canada this year show how quickly preventable diseases bounce back. The takeaway? Global travel and climate shifts make containment tough. For North Americans, it means staying up on shots, watching travel advisories, and supporting better surveillance, because the next big one won't announce itself in advance. Now, flip to the digital front. Cyber attacks are exploding, especially ransomware targeting critical stuff we rely on daily. In 2025 alone, thousands of incidents worldwide, with half hitting key sectors like manufacturing, healthcare, energy, and finance, a 34% jump from last year. Groups like Akira and Medusa are hammering hospitals, utilities, and factories, encrypting data and demanding millions. In the US, attacks on infrastructure providers, telecoms, and even schools have caused outages, data leaks, and massive costs. State-backed hackers from China and elsewhere are spying and disrupting, while criminals go for the cash. Why does this hit home? A hacked power grid could mean blackouts in winter. A hospital breach delays care or exposes your records. Supply chains grind to halts, driving up prices. It's chaos without a single shot fired. These threats intertwine. Imagine a cyber attack crippling pandemic response systems, but preparedness helps. Strong hygiene, vaccines, and basic cyber habits like updates and caution with emails. We've painted a pretty grim picture so far: ongoing conflicts, devastating climate events, economic ups and downs, and lurking threats like pandemics and cyberattacks. But here's the thing. Amid all this chaos in 2025, there are real signs of progress that give us hope. If you're watching from the US or Canada, these developments show that collective action, innovation, and resilience can turn the tide. Let's highlight some bright spots that remind us why we shouldn't lose faith. First, on the climate front. Despite record disasters, renewable energy is booming like never before. Globally, renewables surpassed coal as the largest electricity source this year, with solar leading the charge. China alone installed massive solar capacity enough to power entire countries, and clean energy now makes up a huge chunk of growth in emerging economies. In North America, investments in wind, solar, and battery storage are creating jobs and lowering energy costs. Scientists made breakthroughs too. Better gene editing for drought-resistant crops and advances in carbon capture tech. These aren't just stats, they mean cleaner air in cities like Los Angeles and Toronto, and a path to hitting those 1.5-degree targets. If we keep pushing. Geopolitically, while tensions persist, diplomacy scored wins. Efforts toward ceasefires in hot spots gained traction, with international mediators pushing for de-escalation. Global cooperation on AI governance stepped up, with frameworks to harness tech for good without letting it spiral out of control. And in health, bird flu outbreaks were contained through better surveillance. No human pandemic materialized, thanks to rapid vaccine development and stockpiling. Economically, resilience shone through. The US and Canada navigated trade uncertainties with growth holding steady, fueled by AI investments, creating high-paying jobs in tech hubs from Silicon Valley to Vancouver. Unemployment stayed low, and innovations in biotech and green tech opened new markets. Families felt some relief as inflation eased and rate cuts put more money in pockets. Broader progress. Maternal health improved worldwide. Polio cases plummeted further toward eradication, and conservation efforts protected key ecosystems. Tech brought positives too. AI sped up drug discovery for rare diseases, and space milestones inspired a new generation. These wins didn't happen by accident, they came from people, governments, and companies choosing action over apathy. For us in North America, it means supporting policies that boost clean energy, strengthen alliances, and invest in innovation. Chaos is real, but so is our ability to build a better world. In our final part, we'll wrap up with what this all means for the future and steps you can take. We've covered a lot in this series, from grinding wars in Ukraine and the Middle East, to devastating climate hits like wildfires and floods, economic roller coasters fueled by trade tensions and tariffs, and lurking threats like bird flu scares and skyrocketing cyberattacks. 2025 has felt chaotic, no doubt, with geopolitical fractures deepening, extreme weather costing billions, and digital threats exploding. For folks in the US and Canada, it's meant higher prices, job worries, and that nagging sense of uncertainty hitting close to home. But as we wrap up A World in Chaos, let's end on a note of realism and resolve. The world isn't falling apart, it's changing fast. And resilience has shown through. Economies proved tougher than expected, with growth holding steady amid tariffs and policy shifts. AI investments created jobs and drove innovation, while renewables surged, giving real momentum to the energy transition. Diplomacy scored fragile wins, like ceasefires holding broadly in Gaza despite violations, and ongoing talks in Ukraine pushing for security guarantees. Looking ahead to 2026 and beyond, risks remain high: more trade disruptions, escalating cyber threats, and climate extremes testing limits. But opportunities abound too: stronger alliances, tech breakthroughs, and policy shifts toward sustainability and security. The polycrisis we're in demands action, not despair. So what can you do? Stay informed, support smart policies on trade, climate, and tech. Build personal resilience, emergency prep for disasters, strong cyber habits like updates and caution online. Vote for leaders prioritizing stability and innovation. Communities in the US and Canada have bounced back before. We can again. Chaos tests us, but it also reveals strength. Thanks for joining this deep dive. Hope it sparked thought and maybe even optimism. The world's messy, but we're in it together. Stay safe out there. Thanks for sticking with us through the entire A World in Chaos series. As a bonus, let's talk practical steps, things you can actually do today, living in the US or Canada, to protect yourself, your family, and your community in this unpredictable world. No doom scrolling paralysis here, just straightforward actions that build real resilience without overwhelming your life. First, get your emergency basics sorted. Every expert recommends a simple 72-hour kit. Water 1 gallon per person per day. Non-perishable food. Flashlight. Batteries. First aid supplies. Cash in small bills. And important documents in a waterproof bag. Add seasonal gear, blankets and warm clothes for Canadian winters or cooling items for Southern US heat waves. FEMA and Public Safety Canada have free checklists online. It takes one weekend to pull together. Financially, build a buffer. Aim for 3-6 months of essential expenses in an easily accessible savings account. With economic volatility, pay down high-interest debt aggressively. Credit cards first. Diversify a bit. Keep some money in stable investments. But don't go all in on volatile stocks. If markets scare you, review your insurance. Homeowners and renters policies often fall short on flood or wildfire damage. Add riders if you're in high-risk areas like California or British Columbia. On the cyber side, it's low effort, high reward. Enable two-factor authentication everywhere, especially banking and email. Use a password manager to create strong, unique passwords. Back up important files to an external drive or secure cloud. Ransomware won't care if you're a big company or just a regular person. Teach kids and grandparents the basics. Don't click suspicious links. Health-wise, stay ahead of threats. Get your annual flu shot and stay current on COVID boosters. It's the easiest way to avoid hospital overloads. If something new emerges, stock a small supply of over-the-counter meds and masks for outbreaks. Build habits now. Eat well, move daily. Manage stress. Strong bodies handle crises better. Community matters most. Get to know your neighbors. Strong local TIs saved lives in recent floods and fires. Join or start a community emergency response team. Many cities offer free training. Support local food banks and mutual aid groups. Helping others strengthens the whole network. Finally, stay informed without burning out. Follow reliable sources like NOAA for weather, CDC for health updates, and balanced news outlets. Limit doom scrolling to specific times. Use that energy to act instead. These steps aren't about fear, they're about empowerment. Chaos will keep coming, but prepared people turn survivors into thrivers. You've got this. Thanks again for watching. Drop a like if this helped. Share with someone who needs it. And let's build a stronger tomorrow together. As we close out this bonus content for A World in Chaos, let's look further ahead. What trends should folks in the US and Canada keep an eye on as we head into 2026 and the years after? The chaos of 2025 won't vanish overnight, but understanding these big shifts can help you plan, adapt, and even spot opportunities in the uncertainty. First, geopolitics. Expect continued fragmentation. The Russia-Ukraine conflict may drag into a frozen stalemate, with sporadic talks but no full resolution soon. Middle East tensions could flare again if ceasefire phases stall. Watch for progress on Gaza, reconstruction, and Iranian nuclear talks. US-China rivalry will dominate, especially over Taiwan and tech supply chains. Tariffs and export controls are likely to stay or expand under the new administration, pushing companies to friend-shore manufacturing to allies like Canada and Mexico. For North Americans, this means more domestic jobs in semiconductors and critical minerals, but also higher costs for electronics and EVs. Short-term, climate will keep accelerating. Experts forecast 2026 as potentially the hottest year yet, with El Niño possibly returning to amp up extremes. Watch for stronger Atlantic hurricanes threatening the Gulf and East Coast, bigger wildfire seasons in the West and Canada, and heavier rain events causing flash floods. Sea level rise is already eating away at coastal areas. Places like Miami and parts of Atlantic Canada face tougher insurance and relocation debates. The good news? Clean energy momentum is unstoppable. Solar and battery costs keep dropping, and grid upgrades will make blackouts less common. Economically, growth should pick up modestly. Fed and Bank of Canada rate cuts will ease borrowing, boosting housing and consumer spending. AI adoption will drive productivity gains, especially in services, healthcare, and manufacturing. Think more remote diagnostics and automated warehouses, creating and shifting jobs. But inequality could widen if gains concentrate in tech hubs. Watch inflation closely. If energy disruptions spike again, prices rebound fast. Health and cyber threats evolve too. Bird flu monitoring continues. No pandemic yet, but vaccine readiness improves yearly. Cyber risks grow more sophisticated, with AI-powered attacks targeting small businesses and individuals. Expect tighter regulations and better tools like automatic updates becoming standard. Finally, societal shifts. Migration pressures from climate and conflict will test borders and cities. Mental health awareness rises post-pandemic, with more workplace support. Younger generations push harder for sustainability and work-life balance. The future isn't set, our choices shape it. Stay adaptable, keep learning, and connect with others. Chaos brings change, and change brings possibility. Thanks for watching the full series. Hit subscribe for more real talk breakdowns. As we close out A World in Chaos, here at the end of 2025, it's clear the year delivered plenty of turbulence, just like we discussed. From stalled peace talks in Ukraine amid ongoing strikes, to a fragile Gaza ceasefire holding despite violations and humanitarian strains, geopolitical tensions kept the world on edge. Climate disasters piled up costs in the billions, with wildfires, floods, and heatwaves reminding us change is hitting hard. Economically, inflation dipped to around 2.7% by November, giving some breathing room. But trade uncertainties and volatile markets tested resilience. Emerging threats like bird flu cases and a spike in cyberattacks added to the unease. Yet, 2025 wasn't all doom. Renewables surged globally, with solar and wind additions shattering records. Renewables overtook coal as the top electricity source in some forecasts, and clean energy-powered grids more than ever. Diplomacy chipped away at conflicts, with security guarantees discussed for Ukraine and aid flowing despite setbacks. AI drove job growth in tech, and economies held steady overall, with low unemployment buffering the blows. For viewers in the US and Canada, this chaos feels personal. Higher bills from global ripples, smoky summers from wildfires, worries over the next virus or hack. But it's also a call to action. We've seen progress when we invest in clean energy, strengthen alliances, and prep personally. 2026 brings unknowns, potential escalations abroad, more extremes from climate, policy shifts at home. But history shows we adapt through innovation, community, and smart choices. Thanks for watching this series. It's been eye-opening and packing how interconnected our world is. Stay informed, stay prepared, and remember, chaos creates opportunities for positive change. If this resonated, like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. What's your biggest concern heading into the new year? See you next time. Hey everyone, welcome to this special Q&A extension of A World in Chaos. You've been dropping great questions in the comments throughout the series, and today we're tackling some of the most common ones from viewers across the US and Canada. These are real concerns about wars, climate, the economy, and more. Let's break them down with straight talk and facts. First big one. Will World War III actually happen because of Ukraine or the Middle East? Look, tensions are sky high, no denying it. Russia's dug in, and Iran's proxies keep things hot. But major powers like the US, China, and Europe have zero interest in a full-scale global war. It's economic suicide with nuclear risks. Escalation happens in flashes, like drone strikes or shipping attacks. But direct great power clashes? Leaders pull back every time. Think frozen conflicts over World War. Stay watchful, but don't lose sleep over we tomorrow. Next, is climate change really that bad? Or is it overhyped? The data doesn't lie. 2025 smashed heat records again. Fueled extremes we covered. California fires, Texas floods, Canadian smoke. It's not hype when insurance companies jack rates in Florida and British Columbia because payouts exploded. But it's not hopeless. Renewables are cheaper than fossil fuels now in most places. And cities are adapting with better flood defenses and green infrastructure. A lot of you asked about the economy. When will things get affordable again? Groceries, gas, housing? Inflation's cooling down to about 2.7% lately, with rate cuts helping mortgages and car loans. But housing supply shortages and global energy volatility mean no quick fix. Groceries might ease in 2026 if harvests rebound and shipping stabilizes. Best bet, budget smart, buy in bulk when deals hit, and push for policies building more homes. Cyber and health fears. Should I worry about the next pandemic or getting hacked? Yes to both, but prep beats panic. Bird flus watched closely, no humans spread yet. Vaccines ready if needed. For cyber, basic steps like strong passwords and updates block most threats. Big attacks grab headlines, but everyday folks avoid most by staying vigilant. Finally, what gives you hope for the future? Simple people like you engage, innovating, and building community. Tech solving problems faster than creating them in many cases. And younger generations demand real change. Got more questions? Drop them below, we might do another round. Thanks for making this series. As we wrap up this extended look at a world in chaos, let's take a moment to reflect on 2025, a year that threw everything at us and then some. Here we are in late December, and the dust is starting to settle on what felt like non-stop turmoil. If you're in the US or Canada, you've lived through the economic swings, the extreme weather alerts, and the constant news alerts about conflicts abroad. But looking back, there were moments of resilience and progress, too. Geopolitically, the year ended with fragile stability in some hotspots. The Russia-Ukraine war dragged on, with Russian forces claiming gains of over 6,000 square kilometers, but at huge costs and slow paces. Peace talks in Berlin and elsewhere pushed for security guarantees, including NATO-like protections, though Putin's demands remain maximalist. No full resolution, but no massive escalation either. Diplomacy held the line, barely. In the Middle East, the Gaza ceasefire, brokered earlier with heavy US involvement, broadly held into December, despite violations and hundreds killed in sporadic strikes. Hostage releases continued, aid trickled in, but reconstruction lagged, and tensions simmered with Hezbollah exchanges in Lebanon. Climate-wise, 2025 was brutal. Record billion-dollar disasters in the US. From January's costly LA wildfires to summer flash floods in Texas claiming over 100 lives, and relentless severe storms. Globally, extremes piled up, costing trillions in insured losses. Yet renewables broke records, surging past coal in some places, showing we're adapting even as the planet pushes back. Economically, inflation cooled to around 2.7% by November, giving families some relief amid lingering high costs. Stocks swung wildly on tariff fears and AI hype, but ended mixed. Rate cuts helped, and growth held steady despite trade wars. Emerging threats: bird flu stayed contained. No pandemic, just sporadic cases globally, mostly from animal contact. Cyber attacks exploded, hitting airlines, retailers, healthcare, and infrastructure, with ransomware gangs like Scattered Spider and Medusa, causing billions in disruptions. Through it all, North Americans showed grit, communities rebuilding after floods and fires, innovations in clean energy, creating jobs, and pushes for better preparedness. 2025 tested us, exposed vulnerabilities, but also highlighted our capacity to endure and improve. As we head into 2026, carry these lessons, stay prepared, informed, and connected. Chaos doesn't vanish, but neither does hope. Thanks for watching the series, it's been real unpacking it with you. We've reflected on 2025's chaos plenty, but now let's turn the page. What does 2026 hold for the world? And especially for folks in the US and Canada? Predictions aren't crystal balls, but based on current trends, geopolitical talks, climate data, economic forecasts, and emerging tech, they give us a roadmap. Here's a balanced look at the top developments to watch as we kick off the new year. Geopolitically, expect cautious progress mixed with risks. Analysts forecast a potential framework deal in Ukraine by mid-2026, possibly involving territorial concessions, demilitarized zones, and international security guarantees short of full NATO membership. Russia's economy strains under sanctions, pushing Putin toward negotiations, while US and European aid fatigue grows. In the Middle East, Gaza reconstruction could accelerate if Phase 2 of the ceasefire holds full. Israeli withdrawal, Hamas disarmament, and an international peacekeeping force. But flashpoints like Iran's nuclear program or Hezbollah clashes could derail it. Overall, no major new wars, but ongoing low-intensity conflicts draining resources. Climate predictions are stark. 2026 is on track to be the hottest year ever, surpassing 2025, with a good chance of breaching 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels temporarily. El Niño might return, boosting Atlantic hurricanes. Forecasters warn of an active season threatening the US Gulf and East Coast with stronger storms. Western wildfires and Canadian smoke seasons could worsen, while heavy precipitation events spike floods in the Midwest and Northeast. Bright side, renewable installations explode again, with solar and batteries making fossil fuels uneconomic in more regions. Economically, moderate growth returns. US GDP around 2.25. Canada similar, helped by lower rates and AI investments. Inflation settles near 2%, easing grocery and energy costs if no big disruptions hit. Housing markets cool slightly with more builds, but affordability stays tough in hot cities like Toronto and Vancouver. Trade tensions persist. Tariffs likely locked in, but reshoring creates manufacturing, jobs in EVs, chips, and defense. Tech and threats. AI integration accelerates everyday tools, like smarter assistants and automated services, change work and life. Cyberattacks get more AI-driven, targeting elections and infrastructure. Expect major incidents prompting tougher laws. Health-wise, no bird flu pandemic forecasted, but vigilance continues. With better vaccines, society shifts toward resilience, more prepping, community networks, and green living. Elections and policies will shape a lot, especially in the US. 2026 won't be calm, but it's a year of transitions toward stabilization if we play it right. Stay adaptable, informed, and proactive. Thanks for watching the whole series. Here's to navigating whatever comes next.